We're back again, and about time too. We've got a hotly anticipated topic today, but first, all the longtime fans know the drill here. Why don't you drop a subscribe and join us on those hot deep dives, huh? Let's talk about some of the stuff left over from the last vid. First up, that little issue with the old man. It was suggested that this event was perhaps for friendship rather than affection, so I decided to check that out. Upon picking up Ninkata again, I found that no, its friendship was still at near base levels. Checking with PKHeX revealed 72 friendship, so unless this event gives 2 points, I don't think this is it. There's also a really silly mistake that I got shockingly few comments about. Not none, just few. I talked a lot about Malasadas because I love the idea of giving them an extended look, and I also just like having my audience learn a little extra. It's what we all like. But I just straight up didn't say what a mythic Malasada does. So, if your Pokemon dislikes the flavor of a Malasada, they gain 3 points in affection. Neutral on it, and they get 5 points. Preferred flavors get 10, and a mythic Malasada is 13 points in affection to all Pokemon. So yes, assuming you have every single Malasada flavor available, and you know how the flavors work, the mythic Malasadas are more novelty and minor convenience than something that should be highly sought after. It's just 3 points after all. Well, it's a live and learn process. Every section like this makes me a little more aware for the next vid. One more topic for our little intro segment, and it's a weirdly specific one, that's for sure. In the last video, I used the track The Gates of Hell from Bayonetta, and a surprising amount of people asked if I was doing it as a reference to Reverend. I'll take this moment to say, I love Reverend's videos, so hell, here's a perfect opportunity to give shoutouts. If you like fun vids that both break down and use quirks in competitive Pokemon, go check out Reverend. As for whether or not I was doing a reference, I'm afraid it was pure coincidence. I just really like Bayonetta. Alright, it's time. I made one very big claim last vid, and that's that this is the most complicated mechanic I've ever seen in a Pokemon game. Yes, even after Pokéblocks, I still looked at this and said, what the hell are they doing? It's the Aprijuice, the Pokéblock equivalent for the POKéATHLON in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, raising the stats that exist solely for this mode. It's a little more than just Aprijuice though. You know I love to go above and beyond. We're not only talking about competition stats as a whole, just as we talked about all the contest stats in the Pokéblock video, I'll also be breaking down the POKéATHLON itself, as I'd like to go a little more in-depth on this mode. There's a little snag when it comes to me covering this topic, however. See, growing up, I played lots of contests in Ruby, and made lots of Pokéblocks. I had some working knowledge going into that video. I'd also known a lot about the affection system in Gen 6 and 7. So when I got multiple requests to cover Aprijuice, I was intrigued, and after looking into it, I realized that I definitely had to cover it. But there was just one problem. I had never played the POKéATHLON. I love Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and I've been playing those games since the day they came out, but across all my mini playthroughs, I just never went there a single time. But you know what? Apparently I'm not the only one! This became quite a running gag with my boy Mercus, so I'm actually gonna let him take over here. You guys know Mark, right? He streams Ironmon, he shows up on Simple Flip's channel a bunch, I literally love him. Take it away, Mark.
Ever since the Pokéblock video, you guys have been yapping about doing the POKéATHLON or doing Aprijuice or just saying he forgot to cover those ones. Except he's done multiple teasers for the POKéATHLON and you guys didn't recognize them besides like 2 of you. And at this point, Heart Gold is my most streamed game and I didn't recognize the references either. There's 2 hidden items over by that building and I just never got them in Ironmon, which is crazy if you know what Ironmon is to not get 2 hidden items just because I didn't even know how to enter the damn building. The best part is once you get over there you see a Poliwrath. That's my boy, you get to see him every run. Since the teasers I've seen Lynn play the POKéATHLON and it looks really fun, it looks sick, and nobody told me about it. Nobody knew about it. You guys didn't know about it, otherwise you would have picked up on the obvious hints in the other videos.
He was spitting. But he's also right. There's only one thing to do here. I have to play the POKéATHLON myself. I decided that if I could use the Aprijuice and an understanding of the competition stats and mechanics to win all 5 categories, I'd consider myself ready for this video. So this one's gonna be a little different. Part mechanics breakdown and part retrospective on my journey to beat the POKéATHLON and learn about Aprijuice. The POKéATHLON journey begins now! So, since some of you need to know, what is the POKéATHLON? In Heart Gold and Soul Silver, once you reach National Park, you can branch off to the side and find the POKéATHLON Dome. Here, you get to participate in what you might be tempted to call Pokemon sports, but it's not really sports. It's actually more akin to the Olympics. I know, it's easy to say, isn't the Olympics just sports? But in actuality, the Olympics are built around what they and the POKéATHLON call events. Small, contained challenges that allow participants to show off very particular skills in unique ways. Sometimes those are sports, and sometimes they're more individual showcases. I want to hone in on the Olympics comparison here, because the Olympics uses events for the sake of showing off a wide range of human accomplishment. If you aren't fast, you can show off your strength and shot put. If you're not lobbing those 9-pound boys, you can show off your precision in gymnastics. That same spirit is the crux of the POKéATHLON's mission statement, to show off the range of Pokemon capabilities through a variety of events. So, the first thing any aspiring POKéATHLETE trainer needs to do is pick a team. Nothing here can be done without your chosen Pokemon. A POKéATHLON course requires 3 Pokemon, so most of us are just gonna pick 3 mains and stick with them. So let's start. What criteria should you be looking for? Just like contests before it, the POKéATHLON introduces a new set of unique stats, this time known as performance. However, unlike the condition stats from Gen 3, which specifically reject the idea of species-limited base stats, the performance stats are very much species-limited. Every species in the game has built-in potential for how they deal with the sports presented to them, so picking a team is a genuine process for this bout. Every performance stat has a different impact depending on the event being played, but let's get an overview. Speed, the most straightforward of all the stats. One's performance in speed is always associated with their movement speed. This stat only comes into play whenever an event involves moving, but if it does involve moving, you can guarantee that it uses your speed stat. You might be thinking, there are sports that don't involve moving? But first, they're not sports. And secondly, there are plenty of Olympic events that don't involve moving around. Power. This is your raw strength, useful for any event that uses force for pretty much anything. It won't help you jump a hurdle, but I'm sure you can think of a few other uses for this one. Skill. The most varied of the 5 performance stats, skill can be narrowed down to typically taking 2 forms. It either makes your actions more accurate, or it'll make you better at using your other stats, such as giving you better acceleration with which to use your speed stat. Stamina. This stat is typically associated with exactly what you'd assume. How long you can last in any event that involves the participants tiring out. If an event involves some kind of fighting between the participants, stamina will let you resist your opponent's actions. If the event is solo, with each participant doing their own thing, stamina lets you last longer. Lastly, it's jump. Nearly as straightforward as speed, if a competition requires you to jump, this stat determines how good your jump will be. And yes, that's deliberate phrasing on my part. Sometimes it's height, sometimes it's distance, and sometimes it's duration, but it's always jump good. Those are our 5 stats, and the cornerstones of our work today. With this, we can move on to the second portion of team building, the Pokemon themselves. As mentioned, every species of Pokemon has their own performance potential, just like they do with their battle stats, and it comes in 2 parts. Their base performance, and their maximum performance, all rated not with numbers in the order of the hundreds, but with a small set of 5-star ranking systems. Let's get a random example. We'll take Porygon Z. A number of performance stats are roughly correlated to the Pokemon's battle stats. Speed, power, and skill tend to be aligned with one's speed, attack, and special attack stats, and stamina tends to be based on one's defensive stats. Jump is usually a flavor thing. It's based on the Pokemon itself rather than any in-game metric. Do you float or fly in some way? You're getting a good jump stat. With that said, Porygon Z is an absolutely horrible example. And that's good. Porygon Z's base performance is as follows. 4 stars in speed, 4 stars in power, 2 stars in skill, 1 star in stamina, and 4 stars in jump. But Porygon Z's battle stats look like this. Porygon Z is one of the most well-known special attacking monstrosities. That's its entire personality. Porygon Z can run software, and yet they gave it 2 stars in skill. But you know, maybe it's just because of all that lore about how it didn't work as planned. Meanwhile, this Pokemon with base 80 attack, which is nice, but fairly average ultimately, apparently has a 4-star power stat. Oh, but 85, 70, 75 defenses are apparently so abysmal, the poor creature's stuck with a 1-star stamina. However, all performance stats can be modified. That's what this entire video is about, after all. For starters, they can be modified in both directions. Where stat minimums are concerned, all Pokemon have performance stats that can never go below 1 star. When it comes to maximums, however, that's determined individually by species. Let's look at Porygon Z's maximums. Speed maxes out at 4, power at 5, skill at 5, stamina at 1, and jump at 4. So speed and jump are actually already at max once you get a Porygon Z, but unfortunately so is stamina. But at least power and skill can go all the way to 5 stars. Every species is like this, so you want to find Pokemon with both good base stats and good potential. Frequently, you'll find Pokemon with a good spread of max potential but bad base stats, like Spinarak here. Or you'll find Pokemon with high highs but unfortunate lows, like Ledyba. Keep this in mind because the POKéATHLON is all about balancing strengths and weaknesses, and is not about max out everything. You will be asked to use a lot of stats and you just cannot have them all. Well, at least that's the common way you're assumed to play this. The Pokemon here are not created equal, and it's not laid out the way you think. First off, evolving a Pokemon is not a direct upgrade. Look at Swinub and Piloswine. Piloswine actually has a worse max overall potential than Swinub. Even Mamoswine doesn't get back the 3-star jump potential that it had as a Swinub. So you must consider every individual species, well, individually. Ooh, just a moment. I hope you don't mind the interruption, but before we continue, I just have to set you up really quick with this video of me biking back and forth in Pokemon Platinum. Don't worry about it. Let's talk about the absolute powerhouses. Actually, no, you know what? I bet a lot of you already know some of the powerhouses I'm considering mentioning, because it's such classic trivia. You know who doesn't get enough attention? The worst ones. So let's start there. The 5 Pokemon with the absolute lowest max potential, with 11, 12, or 13 stars between all their maximum stats combined, are Slackoth, Geodude, Gulpin, Alakazam, and the absolute worst in the whole game, our old pal, Feeble Ass. Crushing the contest circuit just isn't a transferable skill, huh? Or maybe it is, given that Milotic is absolutely crushing the charts here. Right alongside Wynot, Deoxys, and Abra? Abra literally gets worse as it evolves. But now we gotta flip the list. Since there are 5 stats rated out of 5 stars, the most anything could theoretically hit is all 25 stars. So let's see those powerhouses. Who is it that's got this all-around Master Olympian potential? Way up at the top, there are just 3 Pokemon with a max of 24 stars. Moltres, who shares its spot with Muck, and Psyduck. Golduck, by comparison, doesn't even have a single 5-star stat. But here it is, the upper echelon that I've been building up this entire section, the 5 Pokemon with maximum potential in all 5 stats. First up is Giratina, and that's Giratina O for the record. If I had a nickel. Then it's Mew, and the most obvious and powerful all-time best POKéATHLON mon, it's Arceus. God himself is a master of track and gymnastics. But behind them is Ditto. Actually a fantastic and amusing pick, given that the Pokemon who can transform into anything is also capable of mastering any athletic feat. And lastly, I think a lot of you have been waiting for this. It's Sunkern. What one can only assume is a joke on the developer's part to take the absolute weakest Pokemon in the entire game with the lowest base stat total and then make a side mode where it has the highest potential of them all. I don't even think it's particularly explainable in a lore or flavor sort of way. Like, yeah, a sunflower seed that travels on the wind would be pretty good at jumping and moving around quickly, but you're telling me that Sunkern can outbench press Ho-Oh and has greater skill than the Bringer of Knowledge? Sunkern being a master of the POKéATHLON is a bit of well-known trivia in the fanbase, and even when I originally streamed this, I remember I had at least one person come in and tell me, "Oh, you should use Sunkern. No, really, it's actually super good." Well, I'm here to tell you that all of that is a complete lie. You'll hear, Sunkern is the best POKéATHLON Pokemon, and what you've really heard is the end of a game of telephone that was played with an out-of-context piece of trivia, because once you finally do sit down to play the POKéATHLON, you'll go and catch a Sunkern, and its stats will look like this! This video is here to pull the curtain down. So, once again, the first thing any aspiring Pokéathlete needs to do is pick a team, and I've got my own journey to tend to. First and foremost, I'm absolutely going to use Sunkern, because I think it'll do the best job of teaching me how to make use of the mechanics this video will be going over. Secondly, I'd like Mew, because I want to use one of the max potential Pokemon, and I like Mew the most. I don't want to use Arceus, because Arceus' stats are just too high. He basically does not require you to engage with any of the stat-changing mechanics. He is the be-all, end-all, the, you know, that. And for the last one, I learned about another amusing, super high performance anomaly. Unknown. Another classic awful in battle Pokemon. I knew it was a shoo-in for having great performance, but when I looked at it, I found that Unknown actually have better performance, specifically if they happen to be exclamation point or question mark unknown. I decided to go for exclamation point unknown, since I have a bit of affection for it after some art of it I drew a while back.
Oh, can we see the art?
Not at all! I decided to make things hard on myself, and instead of just putting these guys in my save file, I'd actually use my randomizer seed to go out and catch them myself. It's fun and gives us some attachment. Sunkern was quick, but then Mew turned out to be goddamn impossible as I ran around for minutes on end in every single location and never encountered one, before one of my viewers took pity on me and just gave me a GameShark code to trigger a Mew encounter on the spot. You might ask yourself, if you were going to use a GameShark code, why even go through this rigmarole in the first place? I agree with you. Anyway, then this happened. Alright, tools, cheats, list. Okay, we can turn this one off. We obviously have to get an encounter with it off now. It's probably going to be a low tab, but what if it's a Mew? Okay. Yeah, so I just used PKHeX for Unknown. That shit was not happening, okay? You expect me to go out and find Unknown and in the right form? No. So, welcome in Sofumfi the Mew, Mechon M71 the other Mew. We'll call them the team coach and put them off to the side. Shbeverly the Unknown, and Helena Cell the Sunkern. With these three, we seize our POKéATHLON destiny. Now that we have a team picked out, thanks to our understanding that we have stats and they do things, we can actually, you know, go to the POKéATHLON. If you want to enter, you'll immediately be greeted with these 5 choices. 5 courses based on the 5 stats we discussed earlier. Each of these is a gauntlet of 3 events tailored to bringing out the best of that particular stat. There are 10 events total across the entirety of the POKéATHLON, and I'd like to break each of these down much later. For now, I'm going to keep it simple and just give you this first example, being the Speed Course. There are 3 events in it: the Hurdle Dash, the Pennant Capture, and the Relay Run. All three of these are greatly improved by having Pokemon with great speed stats, but the events actually use a variety of stats. For example, skill is useful in all of these, but Hurdle Dash becomes quite difficult without good jumping. When considering the course you're about to do, you have to think about what stats you want to focus on to make the competition as easy for yourself as possible, and to balance around the upcoming events. So, with that knowledge, the observant among you will notice that I've been very careful to use words like potential and maximum all this time. Let's talk about that. The very first thing I want you to understand is the stats screen, because it's handled very differently from the contest stats. I'll show you two Pokemon with different conditions. If you know how the contest stats work, and I know a number of you watching this may have dabbled in just such a thing, then you know that these graphs correspond to numerical values. It makes sense. This graph is higher because it has higher numbers. It creates a simple breakdown. Cuteness ranges from 0 to 255. This Pokéblock raises cuteness by 23. Now I can explain how we get those numbers. Let's try that with performance though. Here's Chimeco and Whiscash. Now if we convert that numerically, that's... If you were hoping for me to give you the classic, these values range from 0 to 255 and here's what each star means, you're going to need to completely change your way of thinking. Understand that having 3 stars in speed makes you run this fast, and having 4 stars in speed makes you go this fast, but those do not have some kind of corresponding numerical value to break them down to. 3-star speed is just 3-star speed, and that's all there is to it. As such, we're gonna clear something up right now. Why do I have tiny stars and big stars? Tiny stars means you are currently operating below your species' base performance, and big stars means you're above that base performance. They're just indicators to let you know how you compare to the default, and have no bearing on the actual, well, performance of the Pokemon. So what are those numbers from earlier? And how do the stats change? Rather than using a raw numerical value like condition, affection, and even battle stats, performance uses a value that we'll refer to as the modifier. With 0 modifier, every Pokemon's performance will be their species' default. To raise or lower stars, the modifier simply needs to be great enough, leaning in either the positive or negative direction. We're going to look at the corresponding modifier values now, so we get a sense of scale going forward. Anything less than 15 points and your stats will not budge. But while 15 points will get you 1 star, you'll need multiples of 40 to get every other star. Remember, however, that this is not a system for raising your stats, it's a system for changing your stats. You will have negative modifiers that lose you stars in the same way. The modifier is our true point of interest for this video, and it's based on 3 separate values. The first will be very simple and I'll discuss it now. The second is, we'll call it our main event. And the third one, I'm actually going to keep secret for a bit because I think it'll make for a fun reveal later. So, that first one as promised is the nature modifier. Your Pokemon's nature will raise one stat and lower another, and these are simply 2 static permanent values. The 5 performance stats each correspond to a battle stat: power and attack, stamina and defense, skill and special defense, jump and special attack, and well, I'll let you puzzle out the last one. For the stat your nature raises, you get 35 points. And for the stat your nature lowers, well, you guessed it, you get negative 35 points. Ah, but you're smart, and you remember that there are natures that do not raise or lower any of your stats. For the 5 neutral natures, there exists a special table and a separate value. Neutral natures give 2 modifiers each of 10 and negative 10 to the following stats. Unlike the other natures, the neutrals won't change your stars on their own, but just remember that no Pokemon is ever at complete 0 for their modifiers. Now then, what do you say we talk about some food items? As I trudged through with my POKéATHLON journey, I took on the speed course, but had very little understanding of how to manipulate my stats, so much of the competition was dominated simply by me using Mew's overwhelming stats. Beverly and Helena did little more than kill time while we let Soph take the spotlight. here it is. The big reveal of the boy of the hour himself, Aprijuice. Take a trip over to the POKéATHLON Dome and you can update your little Apricorn case to a certified mixology kit with the addition of a brand new Apra blender. The Apra blender blends apricorns, but is not too unlike the berry blenders or the Poffin pots. You put 1 to 5 apricorns in the blender, and rather than play a mini game, you simply take 100 steps in-game. Do that, and you'll have a drink. What's really different here is that the Apra blender does not create single-use consumables the way it worked in Gen 3, nor does it make a batch of them like Gen 4 and onwards. The Apra blender storage is unique. See, within the blender is a drink that comes with 3 uses. Use all 3 servings, and the blender goes back to its empty state, as though it were never touched. But if you were to leave even one of the servings in there, you might discover that you can just keep adding apricorns. You see, unlike a Pokéblock, a batch of Aprijuice is not done when the blender completes its cycle. A batch of Aprijuice is only done when you say it's done. And it's with that crucial knowledge in hand that we can actually go in and look at the components of this illustrious drink. Aprijuice has 6 stats: spicy, dry, sweet, bitter, sour, and smoothness. Right, hold on a second. See, the real kicker here is that smoothness isn't real. The game actually seems to be confused on whether or not it's continuing to use the smoothness stat. At the shopping area outside the POKéATHLON Dome, you can buy Aprijuice just like Poffins and Platinum, and the vendor will give you these stats: richness and smoothness. Except when you actually check your Apra blender, your juice is rated with the stats of flavor and mildness. And we're not here to buy random juice that comes with the worst explanations of all time. So we're gonna stick with flavor and mildness as our stats. And yes, flavor is indeed once again split into the classic 5 categories, but this time it's actually just for flavor. The nature-based flavor preferences are not present in this mechanic. However, as usual, the flavor stats are simply stand-ins for the actual Pokemon stats we want to modify. Spicy is power, sour is stamina, dry is skill, bitter is jump, and sweet is speed. Here are the 5 apricorn colors they correspond to. Convenient that these colors from Gen 3 happen to line up perfectly with the apricorns introduced in Gen 2. Is there something significant about red, blue, green, yellow, and pink? Oh, it's like the Gen 1 games. Oh, but there's no pink version. Well, hold on. Oh my god! So, what about the black and white apricorns? For that, we need to get into the math and what the apricorns actually do. Continuing our trend of balance, every apricorn's effect is twofold. Within the resulting Aprijuice, they raise their corresponding flavor stat by 4 points, but they all have a flavor that they weaken as well. I'm gonna make a quick aside and say that if you know the Pokéblock formula, you'll know that each flavor is weakened by another flavor over there. Those are not replicated here. We've completely shuffled the list for this game. Are you surprised? Here are the 5 apricorns again with their corresponding flavors that they raise by 4 points, but now with their weakening flavors. They lower these flavor stats by 2 points each. Now for the black and white apricorns, which have special effects. The black apricorns raise every flavor stat by 2 points, and the white apricorns lower every flavor by 2. What I've saddled you with here is a whole bunch of building blocks. You can put 1 to 5 apricorns with straightforward positive and negative effects into the blender. So now let's talk about what you're working towards. The flavor stat listed in the Aprijuice's menus is the total of all the individual flavors. As mentioned, you are intended to make a drink and then add more apricorns, raising the flavor stat higher. Do this enough times and you'll find that the Aprijuice's flavor caps at 100. However, if you try to pour all your resources into a single flavor, you'll find that those can only reach a maximum of 63. Now then, the game will never stop you from continuing to build on your existing Aprijuice. So what happens if you build on one that's already at 100 flavor? Here's what the game does. Let's take an example juice that has 50 spicy, 30 dry, and 20 bitter. First, look at the flavor that said apricorn just raised. Let's say we added a red apricorn, which raises spicy by 4 and lowers sour by 2. Flavors don't go below 0, so raising spicy to 54 is the only effect that this apricorn has. That puts us at 104 flavor currently. Since spicy is the flavor that was just raised, we remove it from the equation and look at the remaining flavors. Whichever is the highest one must now be lowered such that the drink returns to 100 flavor. So, we subtract 4 from dry, and this is our new drink. 54 spicy, 26 dry, and 20 bitter. We can then add a blue apricorn, which will raise dry to 30 and drop bitter to 18. Now we're at 102 flavor. Now remove dry, since that's the stat that was just raised. Find the highest stat here and subtract it so we're down to 100. This gives us a drink that's 52 spicy, 30 dry, and 18 bitter. Now, if you were to add a black apricorn, the game throws all that out and just picks a random stat to drop below the threshold. The white apricorn is obviously removed from this equation altogether, since it only lowers points. At this point, you're probably wondering, okay, what if your drink is 50 spicy, 25 dry, and 25 bitter before you add a red apricorn? Then what happens? As usual, there's just a simple tiebreaker hierarchy. But put a pin in that, because there'll be a better time to bring it up. Here, why don't we just stick that in our little platinum showcase down here. Now, I struggled a lot to understand what to do with these limits at first. I know one of the first things I did was make an all 20 drink by just loading the blender with black apricorns, but you're really meant to min-max here. Pick 1 or 2 stats you want to raise and really balance around getting those as high as possible. There's even a bit of a trick here. Let's say you want to make a juice that's spicy and sweet, but the problem is that sweet lowers spice. So you add all the pink apricorns first, then the reds. As you try to make more complex drinks, you give yourself puzzles to solve as you think about what order you should be adding apricorns and in what amounts. Ultimately, this is all because Aprijuice is meant to not only be a modifier, but a one-time modifier. You get exactly 1 Aprijuice for your Pokemon, and if you drink a second one, you must overwrite the first one. These are meant to be swapped out for each competition you partake in. Hell, you wanna know the real shit? If you put your Pokemon in the PC, the Aprijuice data is not stored. You will lose whatever your Aprijuice effect is if you deposit them. Remember this fact, because it'll read as a strange decision as we discuss more about this. Let's talk about the tasting mechanic that's in the Apri Blender menu. There's a lot of stuff to discuss here, as every single flavor, strength, and combination has different phrases to describe what the stats of a particular Aprijuice are in as few lines as possible. Just right now, I'm gonna say that Bulbapedia has a great table here. Just taste your drink and then consult that, because it's not like it'll be particularly conducive to our breakdown here if I just start reading this whole thing off at you. If your strongest flavor is spicy and its strength is from 1 to 20, you'll say that the drink is a little spicy. You get it. What I want to do is dive into the phrases for all the little fringe scenarios. If you've got at least 4 flavors that are each at 7 points or under, your drink is quite weak. If at least 1 flavor reaches 20 points, and the difference between the strongest and the 4th strongest flavors isn't greater than 12 points, then it's unspeakably incredible and evenly balanced. If the strongest flavor instead goes up to 21, then your drink is incredibly unspeakable and competing. You get a different comment depending on how many flavors you have too. If it's just 1 or 2 flavors present, your drink has a refreshing aftertaste. If you have 3 flavors, all 3 lines will simply be describing the strength of those 3 flavors. If you have 4 flavors, they'll describe the strongest 2 and then tell you which one is absent by saying that the drink is eliminating that flavor. And if you have 5 flavors, it's disgusting. At this point, you might be getting the idea. Pick 1 or 2 flavors, put apricorns together to raise those flavor stats, then you give the drinks to your Pokemon to add onto their stat modifiers, which lets you raise their performance. But we're forgetting someone. The mildness stat. Mildness is the stat that determines not how effective your Aprijuice is, but how negatively it will impact you. Because, as it turns out, every Aprijuice you drink will come with both a stat raising and a stat lowering portion. It's not avoidable. Just like with natures, you have to lower some of your stats in order to raise others. So now, we must talk about the negative modifier that Aprijuice comes with. Now is when we can take that pin and talk about the tiebreaker hierarchy. The game uses this order: spicy, sour, dry, bitter, sweet. If there are ever 2 or more stats with the same value, we say that the one who comes first in this order is the higher stat. If your Aprijuice has 20 spicy and 20 dry, then spicy is the highest stat. I've been saying 1 or 2 during this portion, and that's for a very important reason. When you drink an Aprijuice, only 3 of the flavor stats are used: the highest, the second highest, and the lowest. Oh, and before we proceed, all Aprijuice math is rounded down. The highest stat in your Aprijuice is given a 50% boost, a free bonus of 10 extra points, and is added to the modifier of the Pokemon's corresponding performance stat. The second strongest flavor gets given another 50% boost, and is also added to its corresponding modifier. The weakest one, however, will be your negative modifier, but it must first partake in a complex equation. Here's my question. In the example drink on screen, which one of these is the lowest flavor? For starters, yes, it is one of the zeros here. But which one of these will the game determine is the lowest? Well, consult our hierarchy again. If 2 or more stats have the same value, the ones that come first in the hierarchy are considered higher. That means that sweet is the lowest stat here, and unless your drink specifically contains the sweet flavor, that means that sweet will always be the de facto lowest stat by default. It's a bit of a shame because this means the fairly important speed stat will almost always be on the receiving end of the negative modifier, unless you're trying to raise speed. Let's calculate that negative. The first thing you do is take the value of the 2 strongest flavors and add them together. A portion of this will become the negative modifier, and it will be applied to the performance stat of the weakest flavor. How big a portion? That is what the mildness stat is for. I'm first going to finish the formula here, and then we'll discuss mildness later, because we're gonna have some words, okay? So, for starters, mildness brings some much needed familiarity into our life by being a number that ranges from 0 to 255. The higher your mildness is, the better, because at 0 mildness, the portion of the stats that you're losing, yeah, it's 100%. They will add up your 2 highest flavors, which may very well add up to 100, and just subtract that entire total from one of your performance stats. But for every 25 points of mildness, this penalty is reduced by 10%. So at 25, it's only 90%, at 50, it's 80%, and so on until we hit 200 mildness. Then you are frozen at a 20% penalty. If and only if you have reached the max mildness of 255, do you get the minimum 10% penalty. This is your negative modifier, and will be applied to the stat in question alongside the other 2 modifiers from earlier. It's here where I'd like to step back and make it clear that these limitations are very integral to the capability you have when it comes to raising your stats. Do you remember what I said earlier about tearing the curtain down? That whole trivia about Sunkern can reach 5 stars in every stat absolutely falls apart when you consider that you just can't raise every stat that much. When Arceus ground rolls up with these stats, there is very much an appreciable difference between that and Sunkern's ability to get a couple of these up. Low base stats simply take you out of the running for that elusive all 25 stars. Of course, it is fortunate that you're not expected to have all 25 after all, but it speaks to the fanbase's general understanding of this mechanic. Now we may discuss just where the mildness stat comes from. It's completely separate from the flavor stats and has just 2 sources. For every 100 steps you take, mildness goes up by 1 point. For every day that passes, mildness goes up by 10 points. Are those alarm bells going off in your head? Because they sure as hell were going off in mine! For starters, yes, the 100 steps it takes to blend apricorns do count, so by default, every drink will have 1 mildness. But mildness maxes out at 255! You're telling me that I have to take 25,500 steps and not a single step less if I want that tantalizingly low 10% penalty? It's not like there's anything stopping you from getting it. There's no better drinks have worse mildness, nothing like that. Once you have this knowledge, the only thing between getting a 90% penalty and a 10% one is how much time you're willing to put in. And speaking of time, you're telling me the alternative is to wait 24 hours to substitute for 1,000 steps? Last video I said I was open to a slow grind if it took literally 0 effort, but an entire month is maybe a bit too slow. And just how bad is 25,500 steps? How long does it take to do that if I dedicate 100% of my brain power to mindlessly biking in circles? You know exactly where this is going. You see, in the past, I've used the amount of time it takes to hatch a Chansey egg as the point of comparison for things that take a lot of steps in Pokemon games. This is a poor metric for a number of reasons. First off, the number of steps literally varies depending on the game. Secondly, it limits my audience to a very narrow group of individuals who have actually, gone out and spent a lot of time hatching Chansey or Happiny eggs. Thirdly, if you have done that, chances are you used one of the built-in methods like the Magma Armor ability to speed up the process. I decided that this time I'd get direct. That's the purpose of the Platinum footage you've been watching in the corner of the screen this entire video. I use Platinum because, of course, that game has an on-screen step counter, so we can see down to the exact moment how long it takes to take 25,500 steps. That should be finishing up right about now. This is the upfront cost of a blender full of Aprijuice if you're not willing to eat the high stat penalties, which, well, why would you want to? There's more. Every time you put an apricorn in the blender that raises a flavor that isn't the highest or second highest, the game will subtract the mildness by 10 points. You never want to drink all 3 portions of your Aprijuice, otherwise you're doing one of these again. But if you try to change your Aprijuice into something completely new, you're basically doing it anyway. Adding 5 completely new apricorns in an attempt to shift your drink to a new flavor profile without starting from scratch will see your efforts met with a -50 in mildness. And you know that 5 apricorns is not enough. It's so much more math trying to figure out how to change a drink into another one instead of starting from scratch. But if you can escape the process with even a little mildness left, it'll probably be worth it. It was here I wanted to actually tout the pre-made juice as being a nice source of high mildness to get you started, but you don't get to put that juice in your blender. You just have to feed it as is to a party member. There is no escaping, well, that. So now's a perfect time to reveal the 3rd modifier. It's called the Day of the Month modifier. It's time to take your Pokemon's 32-bit PID, also known as the personality value. The last 5 digits, and yes, that's digits, not bits, not hex digits. We're looking at the personality value written in decimal here, will represent a major variable for the Pokemon's power, stamina, skill, jump, and speed stats. Yes, it's in reverse order this time. I'm going to use Bulbapedia's layout and variables here, so these stats will also be assigned a variable called attribute, and they are 0 through 4 for each of the stats in this order. With these variables, we can now talk about the formula. It's a mod function formula that uses what day of the month it is to generate a number. The formula goes as such. Let's use Zoob's as the example. We'll do the skill stat. Zoob's personality value in decimal is 311,340,096, converted from this hex value. First, take the day of the month, add it to the attribute value, and add 3. I'll do something crazy and admit that it is January 15th as I write this. Yes, I know. And since this is the skill stat, attribute is 2. 15 plus 2 plus 3 is 20. We do similar math over here and get the same result. The skill stat always returns the same value in these two. 20 times 20 is 400, and now we get Zoob's personality value to add the skill digit. Power, stamina, skill. it's 0. Now, take this number and mod 10. Mod is a function that divides integers with a remainder, and just returns the remainder. 400 divides by 10 evenly, leaving no remainder. That means it's 0. And now we double that, still 0, and subtract by 9. Our final result is -9, and thus, for the 15th of the month specifically, Zoobs gets a -9 modifier on her skill stat. This formula will always return odd numbers between 9 and -9, and with a couple exceptions due to the math for certain digits, it cycles every 10 days until the month rolls over, of course, and we automatically go back to day 1. For comparison, if I'd done this tomorrow, our day would be 16, and the math would come out to be -7. But on the 17th, it would come out to be +9. The absolute minimum and the absolute maximum, just 2 days apart. It's an extremely small modifier, but 9 points could very well be the difference between 2 stars or 3, and you could be penalized just because you happen to play on Friday instead of Sunday this weekend. Every single stat is subject to this every day, and ultimately, you can't know what your personality value is in a normal playthrough. So it is simply the whims of, did I wake up with 1 less star in jump? Because I might not be in the mood to do the jump competition today if so. Ostensibly, this is meant to give some external chaos to the POKéATHLON, to make it a little different whenever you do it, as your Pokemon might just be slower tomorrow than they were today. But it reinforces something that I think the POKéATHLON is built around, and it's one of the weirdest aspects I think they could have focused on. Waiting. I definitely don't believe that you're meant to wait until you get a good day on the POKéATHLON, but having certain days impacted is compounding the issue we've been building up this entire time. To make perfect Aprijuice takes so much time or effort, or some combination of the two, and I've left out the most important part that's been an issue since Pokéblocks actually. Actually getting your resources. How do you get berries? You have to plant them and wait in real time. There's a big difference though. You can plant berries however you like, and the more berries you have, the further you can spread them, until you've got the whole region filled with berries and you're increasing your yield exponentially. It still takes a long time and can definitely be agony, but this time around, we're using apricorns. Come look at this. This is an apricorn map for Heart Gold and Soul Silver by Pasukaru on GameFAQs. On it, we can see the entirety of the apricorn yield in the entire game. It's vastly improved over GSC, but let's just count these up. 3 red, 4 yellow, 4 blue, 4 pink, 5 black, 3 white, and 8 green. I'm not going to touch that one. But apricorns restore once a day in-game, so assuming you're gonna go around and pick up every single one every single day, you are hard capped by these limits. The only other way to get apricorns is to buy them. Yes, you can buy apricorns from the POKéATHLON Dome, using the points you've accrued from competing in the POKéATHLON to buy from their shop, which has a variable stock depending on the day of the week. So Aprijuice is just a long, slow process of trying desperately to get the materials together to make a very difficult to optimize drink that equally requires a long, slow process just to show up on the day of and get penalized a star because that was your luck this day of the month. And now, finally, may I remind you that if you've gotten a good Aprijuice bonus on one of your Pokemon, you cannot put them in the PC. You have to hold on to them for as long as you're going to spend on the Aprijuice mechanic. I had many tools to hyper streamline this process. Here, look at this. You can just go ahead and set the apricorn amounts to whatever you'd like. Absolutely wonderful for your Pokemon professor trying to learn today's topic, but it won't help the average aspiring Pokéathlete, I'm afraid. But now you know. I think that's everything about Aprijuice itself. What else is there? The hand on the blender is the same as the PC hand, which is based on the PC hand from Gen 3? Look, I'll call it now. We've escaped the Aprijuice void and can finally do the fun part. Let's talk about the POKéATHLON. With a slightly better understanding of the game, I went in for the speed course again. and then I did the power course. But I left Helena behind in exchange for a random Credilli because I didn't feel like making another Aprijuice for her. Let's finally talk about the 10 events you'll be participating in when you play the POKéATHLON. Every event has a course it shows up in, goals for competing, a mix of stats used, and a scoring system that will be converted into athlete points, the overarching point system for the whole of the POKéATHLON. We're going in the order you'd see each event in if you just went down the list and did every competition, starting with Hurdle Dash. All 12 competitors run down a parallel track covered in hurdles. You're shown just your 3 team members who will start running on their own, and you've got to tap your Pokémon to make them jump, or tunnel if you're using Diglett or Dugtrio. If your Pokémon jumps right before a hurdle, you get a speed boost. Stack up to 4 of these and you'll reach max speed with a green stream over your head. You can also go for perfect jumps, allowing you to jump the moment you'd normally hit a hurdle. It almost feels like a parry, honestly. Hurdle Dash uses 3 stats. Speed is your top speed. It's how fast you can go, but it's gotta be combined with Skill, which is your acceleration. The race starts at a standstill, and you're brought to a stop every time you hit a hurdle, so the skill stat determines how quickly you get back to top speed. Lastly, of course, is Jump, which controls how long your jumps last. The best jumpers are all the floaty and flying Pokemon, and they really soar, but it can make some timing a little finicky. Scoring isn't too complicated. It's based on total time. When a Pokemon crosses the finish line, the game takes the time it took them to run the hurdle dash, and all 3 of your Pokemon's times, in seconds, are added together. Your score is 11,500 divided by your team's total time. Pennant Capture! This game takes place in a little sandbox playground, complete with some beachgoer paraphernalia. It's not just for flavor though, because those serve as the obstacles that you're meant to dash around while picking up flags scattered in the sand. Movement is done by flicking the stylus to get short dashes in variable directions. Touch a flag to collect it, but points are not counted until you bring the flags back to the checkered relay line. Time is spent counting your flags, and then your teammates swap out in their team order. If a Pokemon dashes into another's back, the attacker will take 1 or 2 flags from the receiver, and the one who was attacked will be stunned for a brief period. 4 stats are used for this game. Movement speed is present, but skill determines how easily you can turn as you try to dash in various directions, essentially allowing greater control over your dash angle. Power and stamina make up the attack and defense stats here. More power gives you greater ability at stunning opponents with dashes, and more stamina gives you a greater resistance to being stunned for long periods of time. Once 60 seconds have passed, we end the event. Everyone stops moving, all current flag tallies are finished, and after we add the flags for every team, we triple those to get their athlete point scores. This game's got a limit though. If you hit 67 flags, your score won't advance beyond 200 for the athlete points. Relay Run! A relay race with a twist. Pokeballs! Instead of dashing to reach a teammate at a predetermined position, you may swap out instantaneously on the spot whenever you see fit, with a bit of a cooldown. Like a relay race, this format allows one to combine the stamina of multiple racers, allowing one to swap out when the previous one is tired. But, since your teammates are not relay racing with determined positions, the goal is not to complete a race, but we're instead given 90 seconds to run as much race as possible in the allotted time. The track is littered with obstacles that are randomly generated at the start of each race, and they prevent you from just finding a straight line to dash through for every lap. The obstacles range from small Metang and big Metagross blocks that cause you to bounce off if you dash into them, and gravel piles that slow you down if you run over them. No Beldum theme for these though, unless you squint really hard. Movement is once again performed with stylus flicks, and like the Pennant Capture, you can ram into your opponents. But unlike the Pennant Capture, this is a bad idea. You'll both be stunned, but the one in front will recover faster and get a boost afterwards. However, their running stamina will be drained. If your stamina drains to a critical level, the game will flash the switch button at you, and your Pokémon will start sweating and moving slowly. However, if you continue to push them, they'll give into exhaustion, and there's no swapping until they recover. Maybe don't try this one for yourself. 4 stats for this one, and it works a lot like the last 2. Speed and skill come back as top speed and acceleration once again. Similarly, power and stamina form the same attack-defense pair, where high power will fatigue the opponent more when you ram into them, and high stamina will prevent the fatigue damage. But of course, most importantly, the stamina stat determines how long you can run before getting tired. Scoring is based on how many laps you complete, down to the 10th. This is turned into the simplest scoring system yet. Multiply by 10. At 20 laps, you'll once again be capped at 200 athlete points. Block Smash! We move into the Power Course now. This event lasts for 30 seconds and works just like Relay Run, where one Pokemon goes at a time until they tire out. But instead of running, you're breaking blocks. Tap the blocks to damage and eventually break them. Every block broken drains the Pokemon's stamina, and the stamina rolls are exactly the same as Relay Run, but you won't slow down at low stamina. You will, however, become immobilized if you run out, and then you can't act at all until you recover. Break all the blocks in your stack, which is 10 blocks for the record, and you'll get a fresh stack. The depth of this mode all comes from the tiny cracks present in each block. Hit one, and you'll break through multiple blocks at a time, and if you hit multiple cracks in a row, you'll raise what's known as tension and get a blue aura around you. Keep this up and the aura turns red. During this time, you will have unlimited stamina and break multiple blocks on every hit. High tension seems to last for 7 seconds, and once it runs out, you'll be at low stamina, so it'll be time to swap. No movement in this one. Thus, the 3 stats in here are as such. Power is the amount of damage dealt to blocks. More power means fewer hits to destroy one. Stamina is, of course, how long you last before getting tired out. And the skill stat determines how much stamina is used on each hit. A highly skilled Pokemon drains very little stamina with each strike. Scoring is once again capped at 200. To calculate your score, you take the number of blocks you've broken. Circle push! All 12 Pokéathletes enter the ring at the same time, starting from designated corners. When time starts, a variety of circles with numbers will be projected onto the ring's floor, and a countdown will begin. The goal is simple. When the countdown ends, each Pokémon will be scored based on the circle they're standing in. Movement this time is not done in dashes. You put the stylus on a teammate and you drag them around. The operative mechanic in this game is the ability for the Pokéathletes to push each other. The circles can get quite small, and they do not accommodate mini Pokémon. Drag a Pokémon into an opponent and the two will push each other. You have an unseen stamina stat, and spending too much time pushing will result in a fatigued status. Most obviously, you will spend time simply trying to get opponents out of the circles to deprive them of points, but a more sinister approach is to take them out of the ring entirely. There are no ropes, and if you fall out, you'll be out of play until the next round. This game uses 3 stats. There's movement in this game, so your speed stat will determine how well your Pokémon keep up with your stylus. The power stats of 2 Pokémon pushing one another determines who can exert more force. Lastly, the stamina stat is used to determine just how much pushing you can take before you tire out. While the circles projected into the arena are random, each round is guaranteed to have the same high-value circles. To demonstrate, there are 6 rounds, and their highest values are laid out like this. This means that this game has a built-in limit. If all 3 of your teammates get the highest value circles on every round, you end the game with 66 points. Triple your circle push score to convert to athlete points. With a perfect score, you'll come away with 198 athlete points. Goal roll! Oh, this one. Once again, all 12 Pokéathletes take the stage, but our stage this time is a 4-team soccer field. The goal is exactly as you'd expect. Put the ball in the opponent's goal. To add some spice to the 4-way format, 1 point goes to the last team to touch a ball before it went in the goal, but 1 point is taken away from the team who was scored on. If someone scores, it's in your best interest to gang up on them specifically. Movement in this game is a hybrid. You drag to move just like in Circle Push, but you also have flick dashes. This, of course, is meant to simulate your kicks. you can move the ball around slowly and then send it flying with a well-placed power shot. Every power shot depletes your Pokemon's stamina, as does getting hit by another competitor's power shot. Get low stamina and you'll slow down. Drop to nothing and you'll be immobilized for a bit, just as with the previous games. Whenever you're standing still, however, you get stamina back. With every goal, a new ball is dropped into the center of the arena, but sometimes you'll get a large gold ball. These are worth 2 points, but they don't take away 2 points from the opponent. 4 stats for this game. Speed's a factor here, of course. Skill determines how well you hold onto and push the ball while dribbling, while also determining how much stamina you use when you perform a power shot. Power determines how much damage your power shots deal to opponent stamina gauges, and how well you can stop opposing shots. And lastly is stamina, which determines all the stamina things from being able to take power shot hits and being able to recover from low stamina. This game's got the most complex scoring. For starters, everyone's got 60 athlete points just for showing up. Then, you get 5 athlete points for every point you ended the game with. Lastly, there are placement points. Theoretically. The idea here is that 3rd place gets 10 points, 2nd place gets 20 points, and 1st place gets 40 points. The issue is when you get ties. They are broken as such. 3rd, 2nd, and 1st place here actually mean that your score is higher than 1, 2, or 3 opponents. If you and another opponent tied for the highest score with 3 points, and the other 2 have 1 point, you both get 20 points, and the other 2 get nothing. Once again, you are capped at 200 athlete points. It takes 20 goals to reach this, assuming of course that you don't tie your score with an opponent. Snow Throw! Each team takes a side in this snowy arena, and for the next 60 seconds they've got 2 tasks: make snowballs and throw them at their opponents. Tap a Pokemon to gather up snow, and flick the stylus in a direction to throw the snowball in that direction. When an opponent is hit by a snowball, they lose stamina, and you gain a point. The bigger the snowball you're hit by, the more stamina you lose, so it's up to you to determine how much time you want to spend gathering up snowballs versus how much time you want to spend actually throwing them. If 2 snowballs hit each other, they are immediately destroyed, so you've got to pick targets wisely and time your attacks so you aren't just eating up other projectiles and are actually getting shots. The game is fairly straightforward, especially once you've decided on a strategy for yourself, so the only things to worry about are how the stats work. Power will give every snowball you throw a greater damage dealing stat. Stamina, on the other hand, gives you a greater resilience. Think of these as your attack and HP stats. Lastly is skill, as every snowball throw has an accuracy spread, and a higher skill stat narrows that angle of shot variance. As an added bonus, higher skill stats also lead to faster snowballs. Scoring is also quite standard. Triple your score to get your athlete points, and cap it at 200. Ring Drop. We're back in the ring for 60 seconds, but this time, each team only sends out 1 participant. Return to your corner and you can swap out at any time to go to the next POKéATHLETE in line. Hit the opponents to earn points. Flick the stylus to tackle, and tap your Pokemon to jump. For every tackle that hits an opponent, you get 1 point, and for every jump that lands on an opponent, you get 2 points. And if your attack knocked that opponent out of the ring, you get an extra 10 points. Be careful, because falling off without being forced off by an opponent results in a 10-point penalty. So no jumping off for a quick swap. You've got to return to your corner. Why would you want to do that? Because, like every swap game, this is an endurance challenge, and Pokemon get tired over the course of the event. Get too tired, and you'll become immobilized, as we've seen before. 4 stats this time. We've got movement, so speed is here. The power and jump stats are split between your 2 moves. Power makes your tackle stronger, and jump makes your jump stronger, while also making them go farther as well. Stamina takes center stage, as it determines your resistance to the opponent's attacks, and you'll need a lot of it to outlast everyone else. We've got unique scoring here, and by that I mean it's the same as the others, it's just got a different number. Take your score in the ring and multiply it by 1.5, round it down, and cap it at 200 as always. Lamp Jump. All 3 of your team members enter a jump space just for them for 60 seconds. A variety of lights dot the background, similar to a pinball machine, and you've got to pass your Poké-athletes over the lights to gain points. Also like pinball, you must pull the ground back and release to catapult your team into the air. Every time you pass a lamp, it'll shut off and be deactivated for a short period of time, and every 8 seconds, every light will be switched on again. You gain 1 point for hitting a lamp, and every subsequent lamp touched in a single jump gives 1 more point than the last, up to a max of 5 points per lamp. Careful, as if 2 of your teammates hit each other in midair, they'll be stunned and unable to jump for a few seconds, but they can still activate lamps during their descent. The stats work as follows. The jump stat determines how high you jump. If you can launch high enough into the air, you'll bounce again when you come down, though this is counted as a separate jump. It just gives you even more time in the air, and requires a very high jump stat. The power stat is interesting. It determines how far a Pokemon will send their teammates flying when they collide. The stamina stat determines how quickly you recover from being stunned, and the skill stat is accuracy once again, lowering the variance from your own aim. We get to mix it up a little for the score. Take your lamp point score and divide it by 3.5. The cap's 200, which requires 703 lamp points to reach. Disc catch! Lastly, it's disc catch. All 12 Poké-athletes are back on the stage for another 60 seconds, but our stage this time is a platform, isolated over the water. Discs are flung at the participants over their heads, and all they have to do is jump up and catch them. The farther the disc travels before being caught, the more points you score. The zones will show you whether you'll get 1, 2, 3, or 5 points. You've got full range to travel the platform, done by dragging your Pokémon. Bump into opponents and you can bounce into them, knocking them around. As I'm sure you can guess, the platform suspended above water isn't just for aesthetics. Fall off, and that Pokemon will be out of play for 3 seconds, at which point they'll be dropped back onto the field into their default position, which is determined at the start of the course based on their team color and team order. The stats are surprisingly simple this time. Once again, movement speed is in effect, but the only other stats here are jump, which determine how long you get to stay in the air after a jump, and power, which determines how far you send opponents when you push them. On the flip side though, the scoring is the most complex of them all, with an entire formula dedicated to it. A base of 30 athlete points is given to every participant, and then add onto that the result of your points times 120 divided by your points plus 12.5. The 10 events are split into these 5 courses. It's here I'll mention that the POKéATHLON is a multiplayer event as well, but you do not play the 5 single-player courses. Link POKéATHLONs get 5 hybrid courses: Speed and Jump, Jump and Skill, Skill and Power, Power and Stamina and Speed. There's a 6th Master course which picks events at random and gives double athlete points to the participants. Athlete points are taken after your courses and used to purchase things in the POKéATHLON Dome shops, but before that, they're used to determine the winner of the courses. We're approaching the end, so let's talk about the scoring breakdown at the end of each POKéATHLON course. With a lot of working knowledge, I headed in for the final day, where I would take on the skill, stamina, and jump courses. I finally felt very capable, using appropriate Aprijuice boost to keep the whole team steady and ready to react to the tasks ahead of us. Though I can't lie, getting through each course was a test in patience, but we'll touch on that later. The way you win the POKéATHLON is by having the most athlete points at the end. The points earned from each event are added together, but just like a classic game of Mario Party, we've got to talk about the bonus points. Every POKéATHLON ends with 4 roundups for bonus athlete points. First up is the challenge bonus, where we're told that the team with the most fighting spirit is getting a reward. This is the underdog bonus, and specifically rewards teams for having low stats. What's unique is that this score is not calculated using your current stats, but it's based on your species' base stats. This is one place where Sunkern definitely shines, because its high potential being offset by its terrible base stats means you have a shot at getting this bonus without actually needing to come in with terrible stats. Take 75 points and subtract each star from your team's base stats. For me, that'd be Mew's 18, Unknown exclamation points 10, and Sunkern's 8, for a total of 39 extra points for every POKéATHLON course. Next is the No Miss bonus, which is the most complex one and requires another breakdown, so I want to swing back around for this one. First, I'll mention the third bonus, for the leading score. The Pokemon with the highest individual score gives their team 20 points, and when there are ties for first place, all of them get the bonus. This means that an insane min-maxing player can go for a 60-point bonus by making sure all 3 of their members are tied for getting the highest record score. I can't guarantee your sanity after trying to do such a thing, though. Lastly is the effort bonus, which is a random bonus based on one of 5 possible actions: dashing, jumping, hitting, failing, and missing out on points. Whoever did the chosen action the most during the course gets a bonus of 10 points, with the same tied first place rules as the leading score bonus. I'm afraid I don't know exactly what determines when you've missed out on points, but I can tell you what failing entails. For that, we've got to talk about misses.
Me?
No, not those kinds of misses. I'm talking about
Miss.
every single one of the 10 events has a criteria for what's known as a miss. For Hurdle Dash, it's breaking a hurdle. For Pennant Capture, it's getting flags stolen from you after being tackled. For Relay Run and Block Smash, it's fainting from running out of stamina. For Circle Push, it's ending a round without being in a circle. Goal Roll's got 2 misses: running out of stamina after getting hit by balls, and scoring an own goal. For Snow Throw, it's getting knocked out from being hit with snowballs. For Ring Drop, both falling off the stage and running out of stamina are counted. For Lamp Jump, it's being stunned by a teammate collision. And for Disc Catch, it's falling off the stage. For a POKéATHLETE to earn the No Miss bonus, which is worth 10 points, they must avoid all of these. Experience a single miss, and you are not eligible for this bonus. And some of these are a little bit harder to account for than others. I'm looking at you, Pennant Capture. With that, all that's left are the various achievements to strive for. Footage will be awkward here, as I would love to just show you all these things myself, but 100% completing the POKéATHLON is a bit of a high bar for this video. Maybe one day. It'd make a fun stream series. For starters are the medals earned for the various Pokémon. Every time you complete a course, you get that medal on your Pokémon. Link POKéATHLONs get a special shout out as they all give 2 medals, because they're combo courses. The Master Course gives no medals, but recall that in return it gives double athlete points. To play the Master Course, every player needs to have unlocked the Supreme Cup. To do that, you need the National Dex from the postgame, and then you must talk to Magnus down in the Friendship Room. Where's that? Well, the POKéATHLON Dome's basement is made up of 4 rooms which contain all of your achievements as a team leader. Firstly is the Solidarity Room. It contains lore for the POKéATHLON, your point records in every course, and if you get 420 points in any course, you'll get the Collective Trophy alongside a medal for that course. Get 450 points and you'll have 2 trophies. Once you've obtained all 5 course medals, you can enter the Trust Room. You can see individual records for every single species of Pokemon you've earned a medal with. If any species has all 5 medals, they're a medalist Pokemon. So if you're going for this, I hope you have access to the Link POKéATHLONs. Trophies are awarded for accruing a long list of medalist Pokemon. You'll get trophies when you hit 1, 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, 75, 100, 150, and 200 species, maxing out at 10 trophies. There are a few miscellaneous awards here as well. The Golden Shoes for dashing 5,000 times, the Golden Tracksuit for doing 50 courses, and the Red Flag for switching 200 times. But, on the topic of medalist Pokemon, once you've gotten a single one, you're allowed entry into the Potential Room. This room shows all the high scores for each event, and also has separate displayables for Link POKéATHLONs, but linked scores do not unlock anything. Each of the 10 events has a default record set, and a greater record beyond that used to unlock what's called a potential trophy, which can be displayed in this room. But I'll just throw up a table for all 10 events on screen now, instead of granting us yet another breakdown. 2 more miscellaneous awards in this room, being the Golden Poke Gear, awarded for winning the POKéATHLON 100 times, and a scale model of a Pokeball engraved with the words, "Stay on top," which is awarded for winning first place in each event 50 times. Lastly, for getting the record on all 10 events, not the potential trophies, you unlock the final room, the Friendship Room. You'll be given gold statues of you and your most recent Poké-athletes. Your statue contains a sum of your best scores in each course, known as your global score, as well as your top athlete point scores in each event, and the number of medals you've earned across every species. Lastly, you can earn up to 10 friendship trophies based on your global score, requiring a score of 4,500 to earn all 10. And that's it. That's the POKéATHLON. I have to say, I don't know if any of you came away with this impression, but personally I am floored. Just absolutely impressed with the sheer level of work put into this mode, and I think it may really be the gold standard of side modes. Pokemon contests have a very simple appeal once you get down to the actual gameplay, but the POKéATHLON keeps the gameplay at its absolute best, being highly skill-based, but respecting the stats game they ask you to play leading up to this. On the flip side though, Aprijuice might just be the absolute worst stop along our culinary tour. Earlier, I said that it was a little tedious on the last day doing the last 3 courses. This is because, optimally, every single course I did started with a mandatory 25,000 steps. Now, I didn't have to do all 25,000, you get to carry over some of your mildness, but it is so much walking and waiting. It's absurd. You wait every day to pick up a few apricorns, get a few points in mildness, wait for your stats to be good, and all to play a side mode that has this much content? Those completion requirements are astronomical. Why on earth is there any form of padding when the mode is clearly full of genuine content if you want to go for it? Heart Gold and Soul Silver just seem to be this way though. Tell me, have you heard of the Johto Safari Zone? I know a number of you just look like this now, hearing me bring that up. It's all the kind of thing that makes me think they wanted you to be busy with this game for a long, long time. Meanwhile, Black and White would release just a year later. But hey, I, like most people, would rather praise this mode and this whole game for its strengths and content, rather than dwell on its weird padding. But you know what I really took away from this? My absolute newfound attachment for my POKéATHLON team. Mew, Unknown, and Sunkern, especially these 3 specifically, have really endeared themselves to me after this little journey, and that's after I just covered the entire affection system. The POKéATHLON is just that good. Ultimately, it's a good mode, but the barrier of entry is high. No, I don't mean the Aprijuice stuff. I mean the, how do we even get someone to try this mode in the first place? Have you played the POKéATHLON? Genuine question, please do tell me, even if it's just, I thought about it, but then I got sidetracked, and I have no idea why I never went back. And there it is. A monster of a video that took me a very long time to complete. You guys know, the pipeline's a little monstrous sometimes. My next video, though, will not be a Pokemon deep dive. There's another passion I have, and that's stream highlights. I really do love making them, so like the POKéATHLON, I hope you give them a chance. I'm thinking I might grab my peeps and Team Slammin' Men for some goofing in Splatoon. Either way, you can join me after that for something a little different. Before we head to Galar, there's a little project of mine I've been working on that I'd like to share with you all, along with a deep dive of a slightly different flavor that I think you guys will like. Stay on top, everyone.